Have you ever bought a car just out of pure lust? Not because there's any reason, just because you wanted one. You might have seen it on a dealer forecourt, seen it in a magazine, or maybe it was on an eBay listing with 1 hour to go and no bids. You can see where I'm going with this. Welcome to my GTI 6. The GTI 6 has lived in my head rent-free for years, specifically one in this colour, Blaze Yellow. But the market is flooded with bad examples, so finding a peach, let alone one in a peachy colour, is extremely hard to find. These cars were bought and sold by the ASBOs, the people who would not look after a car, and they'd modify them, put body kits on them, and this one, as you can see, is clearly original, which is what I liked. Sadly, my passion for an untouched GTI wasn't universally shared back in their heyday. Like every French car in the 2000s, these things had a real drop in value. It wasn't too long ago that a decent one was only a couple of grand, but now they're finally going back up in price. So when this 86,000 mile example came up my desired spec with a huge service history file and at a sensible value, I pulled the trigger on my dream Peugeot hot hatch. Right then, let me show you around the GTI 6, because what a car this is. A car that is kind of divided in opinions. I think it's beautiful. It replaced the 309, which was a very angular car, and when they gave this kind of curvy edge to the 306, it really appealed to me. And when they brought out the GTI 6, that was the one to have. I know people like the D-turbos and the XUD engine cars, but this is the one to have for me. It's got the best engine note, the best gearbox, the best drivetrain, the best chassis, and they came in the best specs as well. I know you Northern Irish lot will slander me for saying the GTI 6 is better than the D-turbo, but I disagree. So yes, Blaze Yellow, again, quite a controversial colour. Probably back in the 90s, this was kind of hated on. It was a weird colour, but it had to be in this colour for me, really. I think all the other ones are just slightly boring, and you know me by now, I love my cars from the 90s in wacky colours, so this one really fell at home in my collection. Now, when I got it, it was a little bit neglected, and it still sort of is. It's kind of mid-restoration. I've done what I want to do on it so far, and then now I've just got to kind of do the odd little jobs to take it to the next level and get it to a really, really mint little car. 86,000 miles, really not high miles for one of these. I was looking at them on 100k plus, and I didn't really want that, so I wanted something nice and low mileage that's a bit investable. It does have a bit of a history, this car, actually. So I believe it was a press car at one point in its life because it had the number plate P306 NKV, which if you look on Peugeot press cars of the era, they all had a P XXX NKV. So I think this was a press car. I've got no official confirmation, but there is a tax disc with it in the history file, which is massive, by the way, and that has the number plate P306 NKV. So I think this is hiding some kind of past life where it's been a press car, but if you know any information, please let me know, because I'd love to find out more on its history, really. Warwick Wright Chiswick, original plates, they will be staying on, I love that. Generally, front end is really, really good condition. I know it's had some paint in its life because it's almost too clean, really. Now, when I got it, these wheels were actually gunmetal grey, and I really didn't like the look of that. I know a lot of people do that to them, and it's just not for me. So I had them repainted in silver, and they look much better on the car. They suit it much better, this colour. The GTI 6 logo there. Now, I've seen these changed a lot on GTI 6s. You could get like a red logo, or you could get a black logo, or some didn't even have that at all. But this is my favourite logo. It's the little yellow one with the dotted lines on it. So it's nice to have that. It's just really my dream spec GTI, which I purely stumbled upon. So the story was that I was on eBay and I just put in GTI to see if anything was around. And this one came up with 40 minutes to go and no bidders. And I was like, no, I can't bid on that. I hadn't seen it, it was all the way in Peterborough, but I put one bid on and somehow I won it, which was pretty crazy to me because these things are in demand, especially a clean one, but nobody saw it. And I really snapped up a nice car, which I didn't expect to do. I thought, oh God, what have I bought now? And it could go wrong. There's so many things that could go wrong on them. And fortunately, it's a good car. Another thing that was a bit of an issue with these weather strips here, they were all bubbling up before, so I had those replaced. Again, kept the original plates on the back, Warwick Wright Chiswick. I've got a dealer sticker to go in from that place as well. It's also missing the sticker here for the spare wheel, so I've got one of those to go on. A little tiny bit of rust on the boot lid here, quite common on these, and I'll get that sorted. Other than that, there's really no marks on this car. Down the side, so straight on the panels, there's no dents whatsoever, and no rust either. That's my main thing. These cars do like to rot, and luckily there was no advisories for rot, so I took a chance, and lo and behold, it's not rotten at all, this thing. It's really, really solid. They like to go in the rear arches. Funnily enough, on the other side, on this C-pillar here, they're really, really bad for rot. But this car, because it's had an arch liner fitted, all the mud has just hit the arch liner, but some don't have the arch liner fitted, and the mud goes up all the way up here to all the seam welds and everything and rots it from inside out. Until you see it forming here, you'd probably never know, because you have to take all the interior trim out. But fortunately, this one's had an arch liner fitted in its life, so thank God for that, because I didn't want to weld one of these because they're not really worth welding. If you can just get a solid one, that's the one to have. I did actually have the roof repainted because it was lacquer peeling really badly. Quite common for GTI 6s, the paint was pretty terrible on them. 4 new Toyo Proxies all round. When I refurbed the wheels, I thought, let's just stick 4 good tyres on it. So we had Toyo Proxies TR1s all the way around, and that's just made it grip really well. Before me, it had the calipers done, the brakes done. It's just been a really well looked after car. It's one that has lived a life, but a good life, not a life of chavery and max powerness. So I was glad that I got one that hadn't been abused, because you do see them all the time with different wheels on, or, you know, a little spoiler on the back or a big exhaust, and you just think, that hasn't been looked after, has it? But this one clearly had. So inside we have half leather, half Alcantara, which was, I think, pretty common on the GTIs. You could get some with kind of like a really cool sort of zebra pattern on them, and a few that said GTI on them as well. But generally, these interiors wear terribly, like really, really bad. This is the first one I've seen really that hasn't been retrimmed, that's still on its original Alcantara, because I'd say about 99% of these are ripped. It's remarkable to see this one in such original condition that hasn't had any reupholstering or anything. It's getting there. There's a bit of cracking on the leather and a bit of fluffing up on the Alcantara, but for the age of it and for how terribly they usually wear, so good. It was all things like this that I saw in the advert and I thought, hang on a minute, that looks like quite a good GTI 6. And lo and behold, it was. It's quite a cool place to be. You've got funny things like this extending seat adjuster. Leather steering wheel came with the GTI 6 as standard. You've got the lovely gauges there, fairly basic, but I quite like that. It's kind of just you in the car. There's not much to kind of put you off in it. You've got that really cool sort of like slanted oblong Clarion stereo, which doesn't work, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to get that sorted. Really, really good condition interior. Wears its 86,000 miles incredibly well. I've seen them on half this mileage with knackered interiors, so yeah, quite chuffed with this one. And everything works really, apart from the radio. The 6 stands for 6-speed, which a lot of people don't realise. I think they think it's either a 6-cylinder or means something totally different, but it actually means 6-speed, because this was probably one of the first mainstream 6-speed hot hatches you could buy. Nowadays, everything has 6-speed. You know, a Dacia Sandero probably has 6-speed, but this thing, back in its day, was pretty revolutionary with 6-speed, and as a result, Peugeot wanted to boast about it. They had it all over the car. So there you go. That's what 6 stands for, not a 6-cylinder or anything like that. Which leads us nicely to the noisy bits up front. So in here we have a 2-litre MI16 engine, which is a really, really popular engine because they're brilliant. They're almost too popular though, because these were stolen a lot. Not the cars themselves, but the engines. So these were really popular with the grass trackers and stuff like that, or the 2-litre classes. This was the engine to have, really, the 16-valve MI16 engine. But yeah, I've not had to do any work on this. I will probably give it a service when it needs one. Yeah, really good engine, but just keep an eye on them because they might get stolen. One day you might find that your GTI 6 no longer has an engine in it. All of this is well and good, but it does beg the question, why not the legendary 205? By now you know I like my rare stuff, and the 205 is pretty common still. You go to a car show, you probably see half a dozen of them. So I wanted something a bit rare, and the 306 definitely fell into that category. But then there was stuff like the 106, and to me, those aren't as good as a car. They're more underpowered, they're smaller, they're more expensive, they're more common, and they don't have the chassis like these. So tell me something I'm missing. Why is the 106 so much more valuable in comparison to these? These are much better. It's also incredibly understated. I mean, you have to look at one of these to see if it is a GTI 6. Maybe not this burnt orange one, but if it was in black, you would really have to notice the signs to be able to know that it was the performance version, because generally they all look the same. Of course, the best way to tell if it's the quick one is to see it in action. Let's take it for a spin. Right then, the GTI 6, this is probably what you're here for. It's all well and good looking at the car, but really, this thing's about the driving. That's why I bought it. I'd heard such good reviews about the controlled nature of the handling on these that I thought, really, for the money they are, and how rare they are, and how nice they would sit in my collection, I thought, I'm going to go for it. And thank God I did, because, oh, yes. I mean, listen to that. Now, I knew the handling would be good. I can put my trust in a reviewer 100%. But I was so surprised to see that not only the handling was good, but the engine notes, how light it feels, everything. It really is a thing of brilliance. The handling is just incredible because it's not stiff. That's the joy of it. It's not a stiff ride. And I do like a stiff ride, but when I jumped in this, I was actually amazed to find that it actually rode a bit like a limo. We're in a national speed limit zone here. Let's give it the beans. Oh yes, revs all the way to 7,000, absolutely loves it. 0 to 60 in about 8 seconds, but I think it's quicker than that. Peugeot were a little bit modest, because the Rally with no extra power could somehow do it in 7 odd. There is things I don't like about it though. Mainly what you can probably hear. Things squeaks a lot, and I don't know if that's just my example or how they were built or what, but it's a very rattly car. It's not well built. I mean, what were you expecting? It's a Peugeot from the 90s. It's a fairly shoddily built car. Gearbox is fine. It's probably pretty good for a French car, but in the grand scheme of things, that does let the car down a little bit, but really the steering and the handling more than makes up for it. I'm probably not the first one to yap on about it. Well, in fact, I know I'm not, but I can't stress enough how well these handle. And that's why it's staying in my collection, I think, because I can't let this car go. Partly because I wouldn't find a nicer example, or struggle to find a nicer example, especially for what I paid for it. I won't tell you, but it was a cheap car. And for the sheer joy it brings me every now and again when I just jump in it and say, oh, go on, I'll take that out for a bit. Even though the fuel gauge does go down worse than a politician's joke, it's really all little things that do not affect the handling and the drive of this car, and I can see past all of them. Even the rattles, even the slightly sloppy gearbox, even the potential rust, even all the issues that come with the electrics. For example, this window now isn't working since today. I can see past all that. I really can, because this is a car that I'm just going to jump in every now and then and just take for a spin. It's got no real purpose. There is one thing about this car though that's weird. Let me demonstrate. You turn in fine on this lock. This looks like a regular normal car. It's fine. But if we turn in this way, this is its quirk. The turning circle is absolutely shocking. And that is because of that 6th ratio. They had to adjust the steering rack on them, and as a result, you end up looking a bit like Austin Powers. You get there eventually. God, it does like to squeak. It's like being inside Mickey Mouse, this car. There is a few jobs I still need to do. I haven't actually cleaned it in the year I've owned it. There's a few little period correct stickers I want to add, such as the dealer stickers and the little Peugeot spare wheel one. I would really like to get it dry ice blasted, but I do understand that's quite a hefty price tag to come with. Always puts a smile on my face, that steering. It really is the centrepiece of it. The rest of the car is great, but this is a different league. Sorry if I'm milking it, but it is just a really good steering box. It feels as though it doesn't have power steering, but it does. And that's what's great about it, it's usable. I could jump in this thing and go anywhere, really. So there you go, a quick look around my GTI 6. Sometimes it's as unreliable as the people who built it, but on a good day, it reminds me why it deserves a firm place in the garage. I'd be mad to sell this car, but not as mad as I was to buy it. Thanks for watching.